So you have to just know that just because a country doesn't have a tariff doesn't mean it is going to be your most affordable. It might be in the moment right now, but be sure that you're thinking long term. And I'll also say that
it might not also be best for your product. Do you have a brilliant product idea but don't know where to start to get it made? Or are you looking to level up your product but afraid to take it overseas?
If so, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Jackie.
And I'm Erin, and we are
The Sourcing Gals,
your trusted guides to everything you need to know about sourcing, manufacturing, and scaling your product overseas. Whether you are just starting out or you've been making your own product for a while, we are here to help women source products overseas without the overwhelm.
In each episode, we'll share insider tips, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories to help you source more effectively, save time, and boost your profits. Duh! We know how hard it can be to juggle the ins and outs of product development, but don't worry, we've got your back.
So grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, and let's dive into how you can grow your business,
make more money,
and turn your products into profit. Welcome to
The Sourcing Gals. Now let's get started. High five.
Hi. Hey everyone, welcome to our next episode of
The Sourcing Gals.
We are talking about tariffs today. We're going to jump right in. It's not just a government buzzword right now. It's very important for product-based businesses, and it can make or break your margins.
Oh, yeah, it's been a doozy of a couple weeks here, let me tell you that.
It has been.
It's a lot to process. It's a lot of ever-changing, and probably by the time you listen to this episode, something most likely has changed again.
Yeah, and it sounds intimidating.
Yeah.
There's a lingo involved, and although we're hearing it on the news, we're seeing it on Instagram, we're going to break down what it means and what it means to your business.
Yep, and ways to maybe help alleviate some of the pain that it's doing right now, emotionally and monetarily. So let's get into it.
The emotional and monetary pain.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to attack today.
Yeah, it's both are true.
So we're going to start because we'll use two different phrases. We'll use duty and we'll use tariffs. And tariffs are the percentage, the law imposed by the government, and then duty is the monetary payment that you make against those percentages. So you can see it as like the tariff is 10%, the duty is $1,000. So your duty is what you pay. The tariff is the law that dictates what you pay.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's confusing because the differentiation between them is small and it's used almost interchangeably.
Yeah. And I was going to say, as an industry member, I grew up always referencing things as duties, right? Your fabric has a duty, your item has a duty rate bringing in to the country, which we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Tariff seems like a newer word, to be frank,
Sure.
In regards to having it be part of my vocabulary that never really used to be impacted by it. So lots of, almost every item has some impact with call it a tariff, but really, again, yes. Prior to these conversations, we would call it duty. We call it a duty rate, right? We would say that cotton has a certain percentage, a tax in a sense, that you pay to bring the goods into the United States, right? And it comes down to the raw material of the item. Those rates can fluctuate. And so you build your business and your profit margins based on that percentage that was a set standard.
Exactly. So where tariffs are the rule book, the duty is the fee. The tariffs are more of an umbrella term, and then the duties are maybe those little raindrops.
The tariff seems to be the thing that continues to change and evolve in today's landscape, right? So you might have set your business up based on a certain percentage, based on what you knew, based on history, and now all of a sudden we have new laws coming into effect that are changing that.
Yes. So in terms of the law, we've talked before, you and I, about why tariffs exist in the first place. Do you want to grab onto that one?
Sure. So there's lots of raw materials that we as different countries have, right? We can look even outside the beautiful window here and see the raw materials that we have. We have grass, we have trees, right? But what types of trees do we grow here in the US versus what types of trees are grown in other countries? And so you had a great example, actually, we talked about with rubber.
Rubber, yes. So rubber comes from a tree. That tree is subtropical. So when you think about the tires that are on the cars you're driving, the outsoles on the footwear, I specifically worked with rubber and footwear, and the duties on rubber were very low because we as a country don't produce our own rubber. We have to import it. So we make a deal with another country and we say, hey, we want your rubber, and we incentivize our companies to buy that rubber at a low duty. And that's how kind of global trade, back to the times of people sailing on ships to get spices, that's the central theme of global trade.
Yes. And that as a country, 100 years ago in the US, we had different raw materials and different trades in general, right? We did have
Correct.
manufacturing here in the country. And then other countries kind of came into play, started doing it better in a much larger way as the Industrial Revolution and things were changing right within our history. We as a country ebbed out of some industries and flowed into others, while other countries such as China, or India or Bangladesh, right, were building major infrastructure specifically around manufacturing. So they in turn became the experts.
And in specific products
Exactly.
in manufacturing.
Exactly.
So in the US, you mentioned like 100 years ago, cotton was one of our biggest exports.
Yep.
Still today, cotton is something that is grown in the United States because our climate allows for it. And then also because of that, the United States still has a big furniture industry in North Carolina that does rugs, curtains, furniture based on the cotton industry as well.
Yes.
So it's an example of something that's still pretty central to the US, while other things that are maybe more advanced using that technology that you talked about are now central to other countries. Like China is very big on plastics. And even when I say plastics, I also mean synthetic materials.
Yeah.
As a whole.
I mean, even performance fabrics, right? Our favorite Lululemon and athleisure wear that we all love and love to enjoy wearing, right? Most of those fabrics are not being produced in the US because of it is a very skilled capability. There is specific machinery needed. There is specific, roles and jobs that people just focus on these specialty performance fabrics. And it's just not something that we do here in the US. So you could probably look at many labels, even if you are a performance brand where you are sewing your goods in the USA, there is a high likelihood that your fabric, they're still having to import their fabric from other countries.
Super high likelihood.
So there's just certain things that we're good at and certain things that we're not. And other countries have stepped in to do, have that be their best at, right? So it's not a good or a bad. It's just the reality of manufacturing in today's environment.
Right.
And so when you are building your business and you are setting it based on cotton being a certain duty percentage from a certain country, and now all of a sudden there are new laws coming into play that are layering, that are taking that duty amount significantly through the roof, right? All of a sudden your cost, your raw material has potentially doubled or tripled, right? In some ways. And so it has real implications on business owners and as us on consumers as well that end up also paying that increased rate.
Absolutely. And even if you mentioned this with the athletic fabrics, even if you are manufacturing in the United States, you are still importing materials from elsewhere, and those duties apply, those tariffs apply to those materials too. And I will say that prior to the most recent tariffs and the current administration, there was a big duty, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a exemption. There was a big duty exemption for when you're bringing in materials only, because the government did want to help American businesses to thrive. So allowing them to bring in the materials to make their good has allowed that to happen.
Yes.
Even in like the jewelry industry, for me, if you bring in pieces and parts of jewelry, it was a zero duty, because you would assemble it here, and you'd end up selling the finished good here, but the pieces and parts were zero duty. That doesn't exist anymore.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. At least not as of today that we're recording. Let's
as
hope
of
some
today.
of this changes.
Correct.
But yeah, and again, it's affecting the end consumer as much as the business owner, right? We as business owners have to get creative, have to try to understand what is the real cost implication to us. Are there ways to help subsidize that cost, which we can talk about?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if that duty rate is going up, that means my cost that I'm selling to the retailer at is going to be up. And then that means the retailer selling to the customer is going to be up. And so there's really no way. And our businesses and the retailers' businesses don't run enough of a profit margin to just absorb it, right? It's like,
No.
oh, just absorb it. Even our factories, when we think about, oh, the factory can just absorb it. Well, again, we are all running on pretty slim margin rates as it is trying to, sell and commerce in this world that we have where prices are just at an all-time high in general. So yes, we can take a little bit as business owners. Yes, our factories will take a little bit. Yes, the retailers will absorb a little bit. But at the end of the day, what's being thrown on top of what these duty rates are coming to today is beyond what you can absorb as a business and even share on the manufacturing side of it. And so it becomes, again, a real thing that we will see if this continues on the consumer end, no doubt.
What are you doing in your business? What are you doing in your business to help combat this at the moment?
So a lot of items that we used to run, we would actually import ourselves, right? So if I'm buying a sweatshirt, for example, and I have a factory that sells to me at $10, I would then take that $10 cost and I would import it myself. So I add freight on top of it, and then my duty rate hits my $10 cost. What we are having a lot of conversations about right now is actually our vendors importing on our behalf. So if a vendor makes a sweatshirt for 8, sells it to me for 10, now if they are the ones bringing in the goods, meaning importing it into the United States on my behalf. So literally my business does not touch the goods until they have cleared the port and gotten here on US soil. Now all of a sudden that duty and tariff rate
is on the factory cost,
is on
not
the
your
factory cost, is on the $8 cost, not my $10 buy price. So that has been a huge advantage. And to be honest, we do it quite often, even pre-tariff,
yes.
but it's obviously that much more of a impact to the business when now the factory is bringing it in on our behalf. So literally what I would say before my business was 50% vendors would bring it in, 50% my company would bring it in. We're probably at like 90-10 now, 95, 5 even, because again, their first cost that they have to show to customs is lower than what I'd have to show to customs as my buy price.
Because it includes your buy price includes their
commission.
margin.
Yep. Their commission, their markup, their retail. So
we're importing it before their commissions are added.
Yes, but I will say there are some checks and balances in the customs system that you have to be leery of. So at the end of the day, customs may request from my factory that they see the customer PO. So if my vendor tries to get a little too smart and say that they're going to put that sweatshirt really only cost $5 or $4 on their custom paperwork, and it gets flagged and they say, hey, we want to see what you're selling it at, and they see that I as a customer am paying $10, a 50% markup like that might be a little aggressive when they know based on prior history what goods have been selling and trading for.
Correct.
So the vendor also, we have to be careful that they're, still playing by the rules and doing the right thing so that it's not going to, in fact, then get flagged and held by customs, which is where you could also, lose the goods completely. So
we don't want to do tax evasion.
Exactly. We're not trying to do that. But I will say that, again, the math of it is when a vendor can bring it in on your behalf, there is almost inevitably a savings to be had when there is duty involved, and especially when you layer on additional percentages that we're dealing with in today's economy.
Now, another way that we can keep those prices low. So I think, let me back up and say, overall, if you can keep your price low, then the percentage that you're paying in duties will be lower.
Yep. Less impact.
So other ways to do that, you're talking about your vendor landing the product for you in the US. Other ways to do that are to make sure the costs that you're paying the factory only include exactly what that product is. So there have been times in the past where maybe I've bought a $100,000 mold.
Yes.
Flip-flops. We talked about that, I think, in our first episode.
Yeah.
And to so that the company didn't have to just write $100,000 check, we said, all right, well, we'll divide that $100,000 by a million flip-flop order or something. And so each flip-flop order had a little incremental extra added to pay for the mold. So kind of an amortization there. We would not want to do that in this climate because we don't want to
Correct.
just add on to your cost of goods willy-nilly, because then you're going to pay a percentage on that. So instead, I would have paid for that mold, just invoice the vendor for that mold completely separately and imported the goods without any additional fees, commissions, mold amortizations, anything.
Yeah, and I think you can ask your vendor that, right? You can say, hey,
Mhm.
are there any fees that you are amortizing? That's the word we use, amortizing into the cost of goods that I could pay separately.
Mm-hmm.
Mold fees, sample fees, if they're helping you create a tech pack, if they're helping, right? There's things that those factories are doing on your behalf that are services, not really cost of goods.
Right.
And so it might be worth the question to make sure that your vendor is pulling those out of your cost of goods, that you are paying them legally, but separately as one-off prices or, fees as what they are, and that you're truly only at the end of the day paying that duty and now incremental tariffs potentially on the true cost of your goods that you're bringing in.
Correct. That will make a big difference, especially as the percentages get higher and higher. A 60, 80, 100% on $5 is, $10.
Yep.
But if you can get that down to 250, then you're paying 5. So it makes a huge difference.
And I have an interesting thing as well to think about. A lot of people hear tariff and they just want to run away from those countries completely. I will tell you that I'm in it deep right now with quite a few products that we work with, quite a few customers. And as you can imagine, we live in a world of supply and demand. So the minute that there is more more demand needed out of a specific country that maybe doesn't have a tariff, prices will adjust.
They will.
So I've already been getting quotes from countries like Vietnam, for example, where they currently do not have a tariff as of today. And so quite a lot of customers are asking to move production from China to Vietnam because of the tariff. And again, Vietnam having 0%. What I can tell you is that like item to like item, I'm now paying almost a 25 to 35% cost increase for the same exact item out of Vietnam because of the demand for everybody to want to be in Vietnam right now. So you have to just know that just because a country doesn't have a tariff doesn't mean it is going to be your most affordable. It might be in the moment right now, but be sure that you're thinking long term. And I'll also say that
it might not also be best for your product.
Exactly. 100% agree. That is 100%. And that aside, Vietnam all day long will always be 10 to 15% more than China. They have to import most of their materials from China, and the cost of labor in the two countries is just different. So, aside from capabilities, if you actually had the ability to run the exact same item in both countries pre tariff world, you would actually be paying more potentially out of other countries that are doing the exact same product because of all those reasons. Now you layer on the tariff. And again, I'm just saying this to do your homework.
Right.
Do your homework, understand, don't just run because of a tariff. Talk to your factory partners, see what they're willing to absorb, see how creative they're able to get. Because you might be surprised. You might be surprised that I kind of say a 50% tariff out of China, I can work with that all day long compared to what I'm going to be paying in regards to some other countries that might not even have a tariff just because of the demand and the need for being in those other areas right now. So it's just worth doing your homework, worth vetting out the conversations with your factories.
And that makes a lot of sense. The other piece of that is that we've been hearing a lot in the news about these umbrella tariffs. So they are across the board X% for a full country. But that's not how tariffs worked up until recently. Up until recently, they were, like we spoke about a little bit earlier, they were given an import percentage based on if the US could produce them or bring them in, or what our relationship was like with that country, or trade deficits, all of these things. So they were calculated in percentages based on the global economy. um, supply and demand, things like of that nature. So I mentioned rubber. I used to be able to import rubber flip-flops from South America for 0%. But if I did that from China, it was like 2.2. And then, for example, cotton totes out of China were pretty high, but cotton totes from maybe Mexico or South America were pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
So, country to country, product to product, it varied significantly. So, the blanket tariffs we're seeing in the news today, those are on top of the existing percentages.
Correct.
So, I gave you the example of like the 2.2 for a rubber flip flop. Let's say today, because this is always changing, so we're just going to use an example. Let's say today out of China, it's 100% duty. That's 102.2. If it was a 40% duty on a cotton tote, it's 140%. So these blanket tariffs are in addition to the duty percentages or the tariff percentages that had already been established by our government throughout the last how many years. So it's not as cut and dry, or it's not like a one size fits all, because for each different product you import, that number can fluctuate wildly.
Yes. Yeah, and I think you have to do your homework when you start to look at what items you're looking to go into. Offering new product categories, there is something that we will drop in the notes below, a link to where you can find your current duty rates, right? There is what we called HTS codes.
Yeah.
Harmonized Tariff Schedule is the actual name. Again, I always refer to it as the duty rate, but really it is technically what each item, where it falls, how much you pay, pending what country it's coming from into the US, right? So there are cheat sheets, there are codes. ChatGPT can help as well.
ChatGPT would be a great spot.
And I always like to say to ask your factory as well, if they are exporting to the US, it is always great to double check that what you are putting down is something that they might have run with another customer.
And the factory's going to have good ideas on how to mitigate some of that, because they want your business. Long story short, they want your business to be with them. So they're going to do what they can to incentivize you to put business with them, regardless of the factory, regardless of the country. So there are some interesting loopholes that exist. I'm going to give you guys a great example, again, in terms of footwear. For footwear that has a vulcanized bottom, so a rubber bottom footwear, the duty, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm going to use like some examples. I think the duty was like 35 or 36.5% for rubber bottomed footwear. They were considered sneakers. Well, lo and behold, somebody found out that slippers, if you have a fabric on the outsole of your footwear, that's only, the duty was 12.5%. So companies started flocking the outsides of their footwear. If you have a pair of like Converse All Stars, or that's the best example I can use now. If you have a pair of those and you flip them over, you will see that there's a light layer of fabric that is melted into the rubber. And that gives you the duty rate of a slipper, not a sneaker.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I use that one as an example because it's very common in the market. And every time I flip over a sneaker and I see fabric on the outsole, I'm like, pretty smart. Another example is that if jewelry has cubic zirconia in it, it's like a 3.3 versus jewelry without cubic zirconia is a 12%. So we put one little tiny cubic zirconia on the hanging dangle of every necklace and every ring and every earring, and that helps get a lower duty.
Plus, it looks great too. Who knew? Win-win.
Also, it's pretty. And so I think that the vendors do know those things and they can help. And because they've seen it through some of their other customers, and they can help guide you. At the end of the day, it is your responsibility to be paying the right duty, but your vendors won't steer you wrong. They want a long-term relationship too. They're not going to con you into paying higher taxes. It doesn't matter to them.
And I think what's important to remember as well about these tariffs is that we're all in this together. So yes, there are other countries that aren't dealing with it the same way that some are, but there are quite a lot of businesses and products that are being made in these countries that are affected by it. So don't think that you are on an island by yourself. If your price is going up, so are others, right? And so we're going to be seeing how this plays out over the next, hopefully, week or 2 or 3, not much longer than that, as containers are starting to hit the port at these new rates, that there will be a serious implication for the goods that we are consuming if this does not change. But again, know that it is not just your business being affected. There are so many businesses being affected. And again, even for those, like I was mentioning with Vietnam, for companies that have been producing out of Vietnam for the past couple years, their prices are going to hike as well.
Right.
So there's going
They're
to
like,
be,
don't come to Vietnam.
Yes, exactly. So there's going to be implications for all countries, whether or not it was there was an additional tariff or not, because people are now flocking to these new places to manufacture. And again, it's going to drive prices up. So there are so many nuances and so much uncertainty. And trust me, I feel it. Like I feel it every day. I'm having calls every day with my team about, are we shipping this? Are we not shipping this? What price are we passing? What are we absorbing? What can our factory do? So there's all these levers to be pulled. But at the end of the day, we are all in this, dealing with this together, and we will get through it together.
Yes.
And we will manage as a country together, and we'll manage as a business together. And it just comes back down to, the importance of making sure that you are properly building margin in your business from the get, right?
Absolutely.
If we weren't running a profitable business at this point, one change like this would 100% put us under. So it's really important to make sure you're protecting your margin, passing on costs where you can. And I know it doesn't feel great to have to pass that to the consumer, but you have to be around to continue to thrive and grow business. So that might be the short term.
It doesn't have to be the whole thing.
Exactly. But that
it can
might
be a little bit to help get through.
But that might be what you have to do to continue to, for your business to continue to survive in these times right now. So sorry, that wasn't maybe the most motivational way to end it, but we truly are. I mean, it's the reality.
This global economy, countries around the world are dependent on each other. It's like you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Like we are, especially in the digital age, such a tighter knit global economy in terms of how we depend on each other than we used to be. And I don't think that that's going to go in the opposite direction. But so it is going to be something that we'll deal with go forward. And I think what is best for the consumer and the world and the economies of our country and others will hopefully calibrate in some way.
Yes, 100%. And so I'm trying to keep my headspace there, like that the world cannot survive at the rate that we're going.
No.
Our country, other countries. And so I am hopeful that the leaders will eventually hit a breaking point of somebody or compromise that gets us to be at least better than where we are right now.
Yeah. Otherwise, all of our American cars won't have wheels.
Yeah, that could be hard. It'd be hard,
All that rubber. Anyway, so that is kind of fast and furious intro into tariffs and duties and what they mean for the business and a little bit of government history and global economy in there. But we hope you guys learned something and enjoyed it. And I would urge you, if you've found this episode or any of our other episodes entertaining or educational, please give us a review, 5 stars. If you love us.
Yep.
And definitely subscribe so that you can get our next episode.
Awesome. Well, I enjoyed the conversation, as painful as it might have been to get through a little bit of it. It is the reality of where we are today, but I am, again, hopeful for where we are going, and we'll get through it. We will. We have to.
We're going to do it.
Okay.
Together.
Until next time.
All right.
Thanks all.
Bye.